In one of my more recent videos, I talked about how you can prioritize certain sounds to create a better sounding mix. And we were kind of EQing a bass drum, but ran into a problem because we were losing all its punch. And I promised to make a video about how you can use multiband compression to avoid that type of problem. So yeah, let's jump right in. So the issue that we had is that we were working with this bass drum over here, which is kind of a dirtied up 909 kick. And then we had this bass sound, which is like a lately bass coming from a DX7 plugin by Arturia. And together, they're kind of working out, but they're also a bit fighting for some frequencies. And in the context of the whole track, we kind of wanted to clean things up a little bit. So the bass drum has this crunchy part where you have this mid-range energy, which almost sounds like you're biting down on a cookie with your mouth closed. Like in this area over here. And we used some EQ to reduce that a little bit. So just this area over here, where this crunchy stuff happens, that was bothering me a bit. But one of the problems that we run into is that we actually need these frequencies, which we're cutting out, in the beginning of the kick, the click. So let's jump in and analyze that quite a bit more to understand what's actually happening here. So basically in the kick, in the beginning, you have a click, then you have this punchy area, and then you have the tail. And if you've never done this, it's very helpful and necessary to understand what is happening at these different parts of the kick to then be able to use multiband compression properly and understand how we can use it. So let's say we're turning off the EQ for a second. We're making the kick a lot shorter. So we're just left with this, right? We have this short click in the beginning and punch. Once we make the sample longer, you will see over here the bass coming in and the waveform getting longer. If we remove the beginning of the kick, you see these frequencies are getting out of the way. They're like being reduced because now the kick and the click of the beginning are gone. But now let's jump into our EQ and use a clean one that I have lined up over here. Let's say we're removing the bass instead of making the sample shorter. The same thing happens. So the bass is gone, but we still have our click and this mid-range stuff that we were talking about. So now, when you take a look at the waveform, what's left over when we reduce the bass, you can see the mid-range frequencies have this punch in the beginning, but then also the whole sample kind of has these mid-range frequencies present. If you make that shorter, for example, you will see the sample gets much shorter and we're just removing anything that's back here. But if we're using EQ, we're stuck with these frequencies over here. But now, what happens if we say, okay, whatever we have in this part of the kick, we want to remove those mid-range frequencies. If we just use a normal EQ, you will see that, let's do this a bit extremely. If we do like a big dip over here in this frequency area that we wanted to remove, we're also killing the click and the punch at the beginning of the sample. You can see a clear difference in the waveform. It's a bit fast a bit, but this is like as it would be normal. Now with the EQ, it gets much smaller. So we're not only removing this mid-range frequency in the later part of the kick, but also in the beginning. So what can we do to reduce the mid-range frequencies, this crunch part, which is present in this part, without messing with the sound of the beginning, where we actually need those mid-range frequencies to have a nice and clear click. And one way to do that is multiband compression. You can also use a dynamic EQ, but let's use multiband compression in this example. And Multiband compression, just like compression in general, it helps you shape the dynamics. So a compressor is kind of like a volume control, and you can tell it what to do depending on what sample comes in. You say, wait a bit, and then bring it down. Or immediately, once the signal gets over a certain threshold, bring down the volume. And you can use that to control volumes, but also to kind of shape your sounds, like the dynamic form of the sound. And in a multiband compressor, you just have a bunch of compressors which take care of a specific frequency range. So in this example, I just said, okay, let's say we make 3 bands. These are the lows, these are the mids, and these are the highs. And we can decide for every band, our attack, our release, our threshold, the range that we want to compress, which is kind of like the ratio in this case. You might have a multiband compressor with fixed number of bands. Here you can make as many bands as you want. But the idea is that, well, I want a compressor, but just for a specific frequency area of a sound. And that's pretty cool, because if we now use this multiband compressor and just say, okay, the frequency range which we kind of, or the area that we wanted to attenuate is this range over here. Now, since we have our threshold, attack, and release settings, we can put these settings in a way that the beginning of the kick comes through unaltered. And then in the later part of the kick, we can bring down the mid-range frequencies, but just the mid-range frequencies, because we want to leave the bass intact. We want maybe the high end to be intact. So we can pick a specific area to then bring those frequencies down. And we can combine multiband compression with EQ, like get your basic EQ right. And then if there's something you surgically want to remove, you can use multiband compression. Let's just check out the kick incomplete. Okay, here we go. Now, nothing is happening, right? If we bring down the threshold, say, okay, once these frequencies get loud, bring it down. Improve the range, let's do drastically. Okay, now you kind of hear that just like before with our EQ, we're kind of removing this frequency area over here, where the part is that was annoying me. But now we can give it enough attack time that says like, wait a minute, wait a second, or wait a few milliseconds here. If we have to attack very short, you will hear we're kind of losing a lot of that high frequencies the moment we turn up the attack. So you can clearly hear how we're removing a lot of that stuff. And then you have to decide how much is too much, how much is too little. I think that makes sense to do it also in the context with the bass. Okay, that's way too much. Release. So what you have to keep in mind is, in order to do this properly, you have to adjust the release in a way that your compressor recovers before the next kick hits, because otherwise you're already down and you're also missing this important punch part at the beginning. So cookie's there. Cookie's gone a bit. Okay, I'm kind of overdoing this right now because I want you to hear what happens through the YouTube compression. Basically, this is to show you how you can use it and then throw it on your examples and try out what sounds nice. There's no way to like show you here now, okay, these settings are going to work for you. So it makes more sense to do it extreme and get a feeling for what happens. Don't overdo this, but you can definitely use it to surgically shape your kick and bass. Yeah. I'm looking forward to see you in the next video, and have a good one.